Nyawiskano, and welcome everyone to today's online program. My name is Terry Jones, and I'm a member of the Seneca Nation of Indians, and we are located about 30 miles south of Niagara Falls. I'm also one of the strategic advisors to Native Spirit Festival, and I congratulate Tweed at Native Spirit for collaborating with Pitt Rivers Museum, who includes Andrew McClellan, Beth McDougall, and Josie Kettle, and the Bawaadan Collective, who includes Ashley Miracle and Yuma Dean Hester, and the 25 filmmakers who are screening in today's program. As an Indigenous filmmaker, I'm inspired to see initiatives like today's program that facilitates Indigenous film and video artists to screen their works to audiences beyond the shores of Turtle Island. It is my hope that collaborations like today's programming continues into the future. I would like to introduce one of today's moderators, Yuma Dean Hester, to introduce today's screening. Welcome, Yuma.
Thanks very much for that intro, Terry. As Terry mentioned, my name is Yuma Hester, and I'm just going to ask whoever's on the call, Ashley and Marion, Nathan and Candace, if you guys could quickly turn on your cameras and just wave hello. This is our crew that we have here today. There will be more people joining us, and we'll give them a chance to introduce themselves after the screening. But they will also be dropping some notes into the chat. Maybe they'll give some links about some works that they have coming up, links to some of exciting things that they have going on. Feel free to follow those links. And yeah, absolutely, as Josie said right off the top, love comments, love questions, throw everything into the chat, and we have moderators kind of like going through and making sure that all the questions are tallied. My name is Yuma Hester, and my beautiful wife, Ashley Miracle, and we're kind of co-creator, designer, whatever, for the Bawaadan Collective. And last year, basically during the pandemic, so the lockdown, my brother Christopher Wong and I were kind of sitting on our couch in our living room, and we talked about like putting out some content to doing some stuff. So basically, I reached into my Rolodex and he reached into his Rolodex, and we just contacted some of our really close friends, and they provided pieces for this web series that went live on YouTube. And we're exceptionally proud and exceptionally grateful for all of the support that everybody was able to provide. People donated pieces, and it was all basically in the name of elevating Indigenous voice. It's an exciting time, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later at the end of the program. For Indigenous filmmaking here in Canada, and I think all over the world. But this is just a quick introduction, and I wanted to say, I hope you really enjoy the shorts, and we'll touch base back in a few minutes. I'm gonna hand it over to Andy and ask him to play that stank funk. Thanks very much for everybody who's stuck around watching the show. Really appreciate all of you being here. So now we'll get to the panel portion of the presentation. If I could ask our faithful artists and filmmakers to turn on their cameras and microphones. Brilliant. I just wanted to say huge chimigwech for viewing and attending the showcase of the films. Wanted to give props, recognition to all the filmmakers, the educators, and the artists in attendance today, as well as wanted to recognize in the United States, it's National Indigenous Peoples Day was yesterday. As well, last week here in Canada, a couple of weeks ago here in Canada, we had the first Canadian National Truth and Reconciliation Day. So I won't take too long. I'd love to get to some of the questions. You've been asking some questions in the Q&A. Love that. Throw questions in there as well. Feel free to throw some into the chat. I'll start out by letting everybody in sort of a round introduce themselves and maybe share which piece was yours, and yeah, I'll popcorn style, whoever wants to jump in first. All right, Nathan, you're up.
Bonjour, Ani. Nice to see everybody. My name is Nathan Adler, and I'm a writer and a filmmaker. My film was called Nong Gom, and it's just a film. I didn't really know what I was making when I started making it, so it kind of evolved into something. It ended up being a piece about my grandmother, basically. So a lot of the colors in the film and the animals, they're all things that kind of like became like are things I associate with my grandmother, and it just kind of like evolved organically into this piece about my grandmother. And it started with the audio piece because I had the audio track I had kind of made on a spur of the moment kind of. I was like fiddling around on GarageBand, and I had recorded my grandmother and my mom talking in the background, and then while I was just messing around, and then it became this like neat little atmospheric audio piece. And then when I was asked to, it had been sitting around for a couple of years, that audio track, and then I was asked to make something. So I was like, what am I going to make? And then I'm like, I've always wanted to do something with this track. So then I paired it with the visuals, and it just kind of evolved from there.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. We'll head over to Candace Miracle.
Sega. My name is Candace Miracle. My piece was called Wagnestohane, which means in Kanyekeha, live corn with ash. So that was the short that I did, all in the language. I've been studying in an immersive setting, my language, which is critically endangered, for about 4.5 years. And part of me maintaining it, and also in an effort to help revitalize it, I try and do as much as I can in the language. And that was the traditional process of, in the language, it means washing the corn, but it's to lie the corn, which is the traditional Indigenous process of removing the outer shell. In the language, it's called a jacket. On the corn, on our traditional white corn, which is our one of our major forms of sustenance. And in that process, it also brings out, I believe it's called nixtamalization, but it brings out even greater nutrients in the corn, which is part of our Indigenous knowledge, which has sustained us for forever. Anyway, that's it. Took me go.
Miigwech, Candace. Head over to you, Marion.
Hello, my name is Marianne. I'm from Aotearoa, New Zealand, but joining you today from Toronto. I'm one of the non-Indigenous members of Bawaadan. My piece was the second one. It was right at the beginning. And it was an interview that Yuma did with me about a map I drew, about some research I did about the settlement duty of the area that I live in, and how that affected who settled here and who made farms and everything like that.
Excellent. Thanks, Marion. Marion also provided the visuals for Craig Commanda's piece, which was, I think that one was titled Love Song. And then I'll hand it over to the beautiful Ashley Miracle.
Sego Seokwego, everybody. My name's Ashley Miracle. I'm Yuma's wife, which is why he gets to say that. I'm Mohawk from Tainanega, and I'm living here in Hamilton as well, obviously. And I'm sitting actually right in the couch that Yuma referenced earlier with, this is kind of where we were having the conversation around the web series initially. So where we formalized some of those ideas, and yeah, really wanted to be really creative. And I think one of the other things that I wanted to just flag really quickly for some of the participants, a lot of the members are coming from various different nations within the Bawaadan Collective, and we're working with artists of different nations as well. It is in large part a lot of family members in the collective as well. So you can kind of see our collective children throughout the series, which is really beautiful.
Brilliant. So I'm going to go quickly to just one of the questions that came through the Q&A. So these films straight away challenge the historicizing of Indians. I hope that makes sense and brilliant to see. And I'll just ask of everybody, is there sort of, have you ever experienced people getting a sense of shock that Indigenous people are thriving and creating right now? Does anyone want to volunteer?
I can kind of jump in there. I've definitely had people be surprised. I think that everybody on the call likely can speak to that as well. But I know when I lived abroad, I spent some time both in Ireland and in Scotland, and I remember somebody randomly kind of stopping me on the street, and we were chatting for a little bit. But I had to get to the point where in explaining kind of my background, I had to get to the point where I had to explain that I was like a feather Indian, which is not how I typically introduce myself. But it was a really interesting conversation because he was convinced that I couldn't be, because in the narrative that he had been told his entire life, we didn't exist anymore. We had been exterminated, basically. So I find it really interesting to see, and this kind of does speak to that historiography piece. It's really interesting to see what lens history is coming from, and who that benefits. And I think it's really important for us to question that as well. So in terms of how we've created the web series, I really appreciate that it is Indigenous people and allies coming up and kind of speaking back to those concepts.
Thanks for that, Ashley. Did anyone else want to add to that?
My piece is very personal. It doesn't speak to those kinds of themes, but I think anytime people make our work, we make our work, and then it ends up kind of refuting those kind of outdated notions of our non-existence, just by us being like, well, we're still here kind of thing. We're still making work, and it's anytime you make anything, you're basically kind of like refuting those kind of ideas. So.
Absolutely. I mean, we know we're here. We know our culture is thriving, and like we see the beauty of it absolutely every single day. So yeah. All right. So I think I wanted to just ask sort of a personal question of everybody, and we can do sort of a round table. And so Indigenous representation in film and media arts specifically has substantially increased in the last year. And maybe this is microcosm in Canada, maybe the United States. But I wanted to ask, as filmmakers, as storytellers, why do you think the time is now? Why do you think this has happened? What do you think, what are some of the cruxes of how this came to be where it is right now? Does that make sense? Absolutely, Candace.
I don't know if I would say necessarily that it's substantially increased in the recent law. I think like over the last few years, what I think has happened is that people are paying more attention to it. So we have, certain things that come out, like the fallout with Michelle Latimer. So people misrepresenting themselves as Indigenous to access, initiatives or grants and things like that. That was big news in Canada, and people paid attention. So in the absence of Michelle Latimer telling our stories, who is telling our stories? Well, we have people with an authentic lived experience, people from reserves, people who speak the language, people who go to ceremony, people who know the culture. I think people are paying more attention, like Reservation Dogs. That's been a big news, big series out of the United States. It's been big news. I've seen a lot of coverage on it. It's doing really well on Rotten Tomatoes. It's gotten great reviews. But before then, we had a lot of Canadian programs like Moccasin Flats. I mean, I didn't watch them all, but I'm aware that they existed, you know, and now I think there's more of a, what's the word? There's more of a palette for it, I guess. There's more of an awakening, a consciousness. Now people are realizing, oh, Indigenous issues, oh, they're important, oh, they relate to me. Okay, well then maybe I should be listening when they're speaking. That's all I have to say.
Thanks for that, Candace. Did you want to add anything, Nathan?
I would just say that, yeah, like people are more interested in hearing Indigenous stories from our perspectives rather than, because the narrative has been dominated for so long by like non-Indigenous people telling stories about us or not involving us in the storytelling process. But nowadays people are really more interested in hearing what Indigenous people are saying from our perspectives rather than hearing it from the outside perspective all the time. I mean, there's some value in that sometimes too, but people are just more interested in hearing it from our point of view now rather than because they haven't heard it before, basically. And it just because people are more aware too, I think, these days too, which is good, I think.
Yeah, absolutely echo that. I hope that like people are more, whether it's education, that they understand there's an authenticity to it as well, and that they are listening to our stories and not, you know, doing their research to make sure that there's an authenticity to it as well, right? That it's coming from like community and Indigenous voices. So I'm going to call on our moderator and ask Terry if you wanted to speak to that question as well.
Oh, hi everybody. Yeah, I mean, what you guys are speaking about is you know, it's like this idea, this concept of borders. You know, like we're south of the border, you guys are north of the border, but yet I feel like sometimes the content of our lives may be different, but the processes that we are all going through are the same. And all of the ideas that you're talking about now about representation and who's telling our stories, and you know, historically it hasn't been through our lens, and we're kind of taking that lens. I don't even know sometimes if I say if we're claiming our voice or we're reclaiming our voice. I mean, have we had it in, you know, in certain areas of academia or film and video? In many ways we are claiming our voice for the first time, or we're reclaiming. But yeah, a lot of what you're talking about are the same issues that we're dealing with over on this side. If you would look at it that way, thanks to, you know, online and virtual, we're kind of like that border's kind of dissolving, and we're able to have discussions like this where we realize that we're kind of fighting for the same thing, you know, to have authenticity voices to our film works.
Brilliant, thanks for that. Yeah, absolutely. Ashley, did you want to add anything?
No, there's another question in the chat though about Indigenous languages that I think would be a good discussion as well. I can jump in and
yeah, go for it. Yeah.
How do you feel about audio in Indigenous languages screening with English subtitles? For context, our Welsh language TV offers this, but the English language TV in Wales won't carry interviews in Welsh with subtitles. Unfortunately, the individual who's asked also can't stay. They probably have to jump out just either right now or a minute ago. So, but just I think in terms of some of the Indigenous language pieces, there is a lot of similarities with language reclamation, and I think that that's really important. So one of the pieces that we've been really blessed to be able to be a part of it's a separate project from what we've been working on, but we've been working with the Jujunha Ngwawana organization from my community, and we're actually going to be working on a piece that covers council minutes from 1800, and it actually details a murder that took place in the community, but it's interesting because a lot of it was held in the language. And so the translation is in English, but it's an interesting kind of time period to be looking at in terms of the shift in perspective that was taking place. Some people that had been, you know, Christianized and kind of walking closer toward Western ways of understanding, but they still ended up having what would have been kind of considered the trial in more of a restorative justice, so like a traditional practice from our perspective. So it's a really interesting piece, but it is being organized by Jujunha Ungwawana, which is a Mohawk language initiative that they've got a language nest, they've got adult immersion, they have, you know, multiple different language kind of priorities happening all simultaneously. But because of that project will be in the language with English subtitles. And yeah, it's very exciting from my perspective anyway, to be able to be involved in a community project like that. Anybody else? Candice, I know that you're much further along in your language reclamation journey than I am.
Right. Sorry, what was the question?
How do you feel about creating films with Indigenous language and screening them with English subtitles? Contextually, Mark was indicating that in Wales, the Welsh language TV will do that, they'll offer that, but the English language TV in Wales won't actually carry interviews in Welsh with subtitles.
So they just don't play it. Is that what happens? You don't know. Okay.
He's saying
well,
correct in the chat.
Okay. I mean, my preference, anytime I envision a film in the language, I always envision that the visuals will carry the narrative, that the visuals will help kind of hint at what the dialogue is. So I deliberately leave them out of this one. And I do that kind of, I do it to put the emphasis on Kanyekeha. I also do it so that Kanyekeha learners can seek out those words rather than it just plainly being translated below. But I will say that I've tried to use as much language in my films as I can. And for the purposes of distribution, for screening at other international festivals, sometimes English subtitles are required. So having to make that decision, I would rather my work be screened and be seen than not include English subtitles. So, I mean, I guess I'm not, I would have my work screened either way. I would rather the language get that exposure than be excluded because I'm fixed on not wanting to include any English subtitles whatsoever.
Yeah, I kind of have a similar thing with sometimes I don't like to translate the language. I'll just leave it, if there's a word, I'll just leave it embedded in the film or whatever, and I won't bother translating it the English version. I'd rather just have it there. It's often kind of clear by context, but with my film I put subtitles, but they're only the English, and then when there were words, Ojibwe words or Anishinaabe words, I would just leave them untranslated. And then yeah, I don't know if people should be forced to provide translations in English, because if yeah, I don't think they should be. And with my film in particular, the audio track is my grandmother speaking, and then she's her first language was Anishinaabe, so when she's talking, she's mixing up her pronouns like she and he, and it's one of those kind of like thing, like first language speakers, they often do that. So for me, when I hear Anishinaabe words or Ojibwe words, I don't really feel like it's up to me to translate. It's like I'm still trying to learn too. So it's like if you hear a word, it's up to the listener. And if you don't provide a translation, then you're forced to like listen really hard to try to figure out the words. Where it's just, so that's kind of what I was thinking with mine.
Candace?
Sorry, further to Nathan's point, I just want to agree with that too. I mean, I feel like, you know, growing up, we were forced to watch a lot. I mean, not forced, we didn't have cable, so cartoons sometimes came in French. I just had to watch that and deal. And I think, you know, when our grandparents and parents were sent to residential schools, they weren't given the option of, you know, we have a translator here that's going to take everything from Anishinaabemowin to English just to ease that transition for you. So it's almost like a little bit of a pushback. It's almost like a response to what happened to our grandparents and ancestors that were forced, you know, and not saying that we're forcing people to now, you know, envision everything through our language, but it's an opportunity. It's a glimpse to understand that bit of a disconnect there. And it's a kind of an in your face. Here is Ganyageha. Here is a film completely in Ojibwe. And I think it's appropriate.
Also in my 2 cents too, if that's all right. Yeah, I think I definitely lean more to the not including them. I don't know if I don't know if you guys have ever done, is it SRT tracks or SRC tracks? They're the subtitle tracks basically. It's very cumbersome, and and I think you can hire out to get that work done, but it's like literally kind of like typing things out for yourself and having it match up. And I think that's pretty cumbersome. But for me in language, I think, you know, being half like Ojibwe, half Anishinaabe, and half Cree, I think I would prefer just to like essentially create product for those audiences. And I understand there's a lot of our own people that don't necessarily carry the language or as well. But I think, you know, there's still an understanding, there's still a connection to it. And even if you can't like completely sort of like absorb something, that there's still a deeper connection to hearing it and including it just as it is within the pieces. So. I'll jump in with a question. So I'm going to pull it back a little bit, if that's okay, and just sort of like maybe speak to some of the more introductory pieces. Let's say we take a baseline of like people who aren't familiar with like Indigenous cinema. What are some introductory pieces that you guys can recommend to Indigenous film? Yeah, just what are some of the introductory pieces that you would recommend to some of our audience? I think somebody in the chat mentioned, Mark, I believe, Edge of the Knife, a terrific film, all in the language, but.
Smoke Signals is a pretty great film. It's a classic film. Beans is a really cool film I've seen recently. I don't know. There's so many good films. It's hard to pick just like one, but yeah, most recent one I've seen that was really awesome was Beans, because it was from a younger person's perspective, and it was all about anyway, just go see it. It's good.
What was the one you mentioned, Yuma, in the chat? Is he there?
He just stepped out for just a second.
Okay, I'm just going to say this, and then I have to step out too. I would say anything by Jeff Barnaby. I think we're looking for contemporary Indigenous cinema. His is really far out stuff. Donna Soleil has a film out now called Night Raiders. I think it just premiered at TIFF. I haven't seen it yet, but that's getting a lot of recognition. And then one of my favorite Indigenous filmmakers that is not from North America is Taika Waititi. And one of my favorite like all-time films is Boy, because it really captures, and then we're talking about that, then he was also director for Thor as well. And I found that there was a lot of Indigenous humor, but Boy has certainly is steeped in Indigenous humor, which is one of our, I think, greatest strengths as Indigenous people.
I loved how subjective that was in Thor. Sorry.
Yeah.
What?
Sorry, what do you mean?
It, I think I said subjective, but I meant something different. It was just very like the kind of undercurrent of a lot of that humor was so like, I can see how it would have been missed, but like as an Indigenous audience member, I was like,
yeah, exactly. You could catch it, or the kind of like aspect of it where he's a superhero, but he's still making fun of himself. He's still very like humble in his character, and I think that's very much like an Indigenous quality as well.
Yeah. So Yuma just put in the chat the film that he was talking about, and it's What We Do in the Shadows, which is also the same director.
Oh, it's Taika Waititi, right? And Jermaine Clement. I have to step away, but I'll hopefully be back.
Okay.
I think also another great film from my part of the world that's like a little bit older, but it's a beautiful film is Whale Rider. It's based on a novel by Witi Inamahia, and it's like it's just a really beautiful story.
Awesome, thanks for that. So I just have one more question, unless there's more questions from the Q&A or in the chat feed. Thanks for being just a super active chat. I really appreciate that. Makes things go along a lot smoother. So for me anyway, it was interesting sort of watching all the pieces together again. I don't actually know if I've ever sat and watched everything in a complete sitting. But I wanted to give the opportunity for everybody involved to kind of go around and to provide some last thoughts, maybe where you were when you were putting these pieces together, and then just give you a chance to plug anything that you have coming up. I can call on Nathan again.
So yeah, I was just happy to have made this work, and also because I didn't have it planned ahead of time, it was very organic, and I was very pleased with how it turned out. So I'm looking forward to making more work for Bawaadan, because they've asked for me to make something else. So now I've got to, oh no, okay, no, that's, okay, so I have a audio piece that's screening at Imaginative this year. So like in another week or so, the festival starts, and it's part of the Indigital space on the this year's virtual. So and the Indigital space on their website, it's free, I believe, too. So you can check out my work there. And that one's just an audio track without any visuals. And then there's and then my most recent book is called Ghost Lake. So it's a book I wrote. So it's a short story collection, because I'm a storyteller first, in whatever format that comes in, whether it's a film or a short story. So yeah, those are the two recent things. I have other things I'm working on, but oh yeah, I have a story in this anthology, which is pretty cool too, Love After the End. It's a indigiqueer anthology edited by Joshua Whitehead, and there's some really cool stories in here. So if you want to check those out, yeah, so that's plugging a few of my things. So if anyone wants to check them out, be great.
Amazing, thanks, Nathan. Marian?
What was the question again? Sorry, I got distracted getting into all the cool stuff that Nathan's doing.
Yeah. Oh, last thoughts where you were, maybe when we're sort of putting this piece together, and then just plug anything you have coming up.
Right, yeah. Quickly, where I was when, I guess a lot of my work, I'm really interested in researching and finding out the ecological impacts of colonization and how they affect our world going forward, and telling those stories and those histories that are uncomfortable for settlers to acknowledge, but I think it's really important that we do in our art and we talk about them too. And what I've got going on next week, there's a festival that's happening at the Art Gallery of York University, which is a university here in Toronto. And it's a very exciting collaboration between Good School, which is this 20-year-old art collective that's based in Indonesia and Jakarta, and they've been in residence on and off, especially throughout the pandemic, at the Art Gallery of York University, and they have decided to bring together a super collective of Toronto art collectives to make a festival at the Art Gallery of York University. We've been planning it on Zoom for about a year and a half. And, you know, given the amount of COVID restrictions that are now happening at the university, it's going to be partially online. You're welcome to tune into it. There's going to be some bizarre programming and some delightful programming and some really thoughtful, insightful programming. And it's been a long time coming, but if you're interested in conversations about collectivity and collaboration, and how, you know, and what we can learn when collectives talk to each other from different countries and different systems, then that'll be a really interesting place and time to do that. And thank you for today.
Is there a link you can drop?
Yes, let me go find it. Hold that thought. I'll put it in the chat, but please yeah.
Amazing, thank you. Candace, are you there? Are you back? Okay. So I'm gonna go quickly, and basically I am just gonna shoot something into the chat here as well. As Nathan was mentioning, the last year was intense, amazing for everybody, and it was such a gift and such a pleasure to continue to put stuff out. And yeah, we had such a good time with it that we decided to do it all over again. And we have season 2 coming out. We have unique pieces from Marion, from Candace, from Nathan this year, plus well over 35 artists from across the world, essentially, New Zealand, the United States, and Canada. And I just threw up the link to this to our YouTube channel. And I implore everybody right now to follow that link and hit that subscribe button, just because it actually helps the algorithm to push out all of the shorts to a wider audience that might not normally see them. So yeah, that would be my call to action for this panel. And yeah, we have some of the best like Indigenous filmmakers as well, like Jules Kostasian and There's a Cut Hand, who are involved in this series as well. So I want to say keep up with the stories. There's a lot more coming up, and we're starting off with the first of the web series coming out this Thursday at midnight, and it'll probably run until next June. Tell your friends, tell everybody, create fake accounts on Hotmail, and smash the subscribe button, please. Ashley?
I'm here to support. No, I'm very much looking forward to the next series. And yeah, I realized earlier I did not comment on which ones that I had helped out with, because it varied in multiple of them. So there's some that I've been a prop holder for, some that I've created the props for, and others that I've helped to actually direct. So there's a bit of variation in terms of where we've gone, but I think that it's very exciting to see some of the pieces that are coming up, and I do get to have a little bit of a sneak preview sometimes by looking over Yuma's shoulder when he's working. So that's it's very exciting, and I'm looking forward to them as they start dropping. So definitely subscribe, and they are released weekly and starting this week, I believe.
Well, one last chance to see. Candace, are you back or no? Okay. With that, I want to give a huge thanks to Pitt Rivers Museum for collaborating on this outstanding opportunity. Huge adulations and to Tweed as well for bringing this ragtag crew together, and yeah, really appreciate the ability to talk a little bit more about the work and to do a little bit more of a share back about everything. So yeah, Chimigwech, but I'll hand it over to Terry to close it off.
Hey, thanks, Yuma. Not only being a strategic advisor for Native Spirit Festival, I'm also a filmmaker, and I just want to give a couple updates in terms of what I'm working on. Most recently, I was asked by Native Spirit Festival and the Micromania Film Festival based out of Buffalo, New York, to curate a program of Haudenosaunee films, micro short films, which are less than 5 minutes long. And on September 4th, we had screened at the Birchfield Penny Art Center in Buffalo, New York, and had a great response. And it turned out that the CEO of the Seneca Niagara Casinos came to the event and was completely blown away by the whole program. And they want to bring it to the casino on National Heritage Month in November. So actually Candace's piece, Lied with Porn, is included in as one of the 12 programs or films. And then also at Imaginative next week during the Indigenous Digital Development Day on October 20th, I took part of a game jam in June. And my team, one was from Vancouver, another one was from Hawaii. And we came up with an idea to indigenize the classic video game Zelda, where we made him an indigenous character, and his community village was territory, indigenous territory, and the outside world was influencing their way of life. So he has to venture out and see where these impedances were coming from. And actually, our team won Best Concept. So yeah, I'm excited to watch how they're going to present our pitches next week. But aside from that, wow, what a great conversation. I feel like this was just the tip of the iceberg, just starting to start these dialogues between each other in a platform where we're usually not, that now that I'm really grateful that we're invited to. And congratulations to everyone who took part in today's programming, including Tweed at the Native Spirit Festival, Andrew, Beth, and Josie at the Pitt Rivers Museum, and Ashley and Yuma, and the other filmmakers at the Bawaadan Collective. Yahweh for sharing your films with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us here online. And in our language here on Seneca territory, we don't have a word for goodbye. So I'll just say Eskongeyai until we meet again. Yahweh.